Hi, everyone. I'm Summer.
I'm Carrie.
And this is Patriarchy Podcast.
I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. It'll be fun. Fuck. Oh my God. What the hell just happened? What the hell? What is happening? Make sure you come back. We're going to do this bi-weekly. So make sure you come back to talk to us more about, sex, drugs, and self-improvement. Welcome back. So last episode, we were answering questions from you all. And the last one was a question to me that was...
what was it like to date a disciple of Kevin Samuels?
Oh, interesting. I would have to do that one later. That one needs its own show. Maybe I should do a little, just a little confessional, me and my phone, so they record my thoughts on that one, because that one's going to go long.
Let's go.
And so that's what I'm here to do today, to give you that answer in its own episode, so that so that I have enough time to thoroughly answer the question. So I'm coming to you from my van studio, also affectionately known as my mobile porn studio. And tonight it's my confessional, because I am making myself entirely vulnerable here and admitting to not following my own advice and not having those boundaries that we so vehemently insist that people need in their life. And so in any event, I'm kind of rambling, but so now when I first met this person, I did not know who Kevin Samuels was. I did not know about any of his ideas. I was actually introduced to him through this person. The first time, as I said on the show before, the first time I heard him, I heard straight evangelical minister coming out of his mouth. Like, the way he talks, a lot of the things he talks about are very prosperity ministry. Like, I've heard women be told these things in churches. I've heard this advice given to men in prosperity churches. None of this is new. None of this is groundbreaking. None of this has any value whatsoever. To be perfectly honest, the first time that we mentioned Kevin Samuels in one of our episodes, I refused to name him because I didn't want to drive people to interact with his content, even if it's just a hate watch. Please don't do that. You just drive their metrics up, and then he makes money, and he really doesn't deserve to make money off this bullshit. I'm not sure what actual credentials he has to make him some sort of expert on this. My understanding is he calls himself a professional image consultant. But I've seen others, refer to him as dating expert, or for those who aren't happy with what he's saying, a quote unquote pseudo love guru. Like, I've heard lots of things, but the reality is he's just a fucking capitalist and patriarchal capitalist. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. So in any event, when I met this person, we met several years ago on a dating app. We casually saw each other for a handful of months. He was in my area at the time for work. He eventually moved back to his home, which was many hours away, so we knew we weren't going to see each other anymore. We would still check in every few weeks, just, hey, how's life? How how's it going? We talked about being friends, but it was very, very distant friends, right? We weren't really part of it. We weren't part of each other's everyday lives, but, we still just kind of wanted to check in and see how each other was doing, or at least I did. And I thought that's what it was on the other side. I would later learn that he doesn't see women as having any purpose if they aren't fucking him and doing the things that he wants done. So in any event, I wasn't aware of that at the time. However, along the way, there was a red flag that I should have recognized after, I don't know, a year or so. He stopped contacting me, right? He didn't respond to my text. If they don't respond, I don't send another one. And this went on for several months. Later found out it was because he had a girlfriend at the time. Well, if your friend stops being your friend because they have a partner, they were not really your friend. And I know that I let myself ignore that, unfortunately, because when he came back and confirmed later that that's what was going on, you know, he gave me this whole spiel about, well, I was just doing it to respect her. She was a jealous person. I didn't want to upset her, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, it's still a fucking red flag. I should have listened to it. I would tell anyone else to listen to it. I did not. So moving on to the concept Kevin Samuels uses of a quote-unquote high-value man. So this individual does call himself a high-value man. I, of course, not knowing Kevin Samuels or anything about this ideology, just thought that meant what those words mean, right? Like, he had values and he had standards, and okay, great, you're a good person, that's wonderful, whatever, you know? Like, why do you keep using that word, that phrase? But no, actually, Kevin Samuels has delineated 6 criteria for a high-value man. And they are: a man's ability to earn at least $10,000 monthly, earning of $10,000 monthly over the course of 5 years, acceptance from a group of other high-value men, access to a fraternity-like network, an accepted prominent position by society, and the ability to be of use by other high-value men. Now, this was interesting once I learned more about this ideology and actually read these criteria, because this individual does not fit any of those, let alone all 6. And then, you know, we had this discussion as things got towards the end. He said something along the lines of, I know I'm not making that kind of money, but I fit all the others and I will be making that kind of money. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not how that works, first of all. Because if the criteria is basically being a high earner, and you have to be that high of earner for 5 years, you are at least 5 years away from meeting that criteria. And that's if you are able to achieve those other things in the meantime, which he doesn't have, because he tends to be kind of a loner. But in any event, so, and apparently that conversation had spawned out of me talking about, because he had started to try to tell me this, and he was always offering things like, you know, I'm offering you things, you know, that can change your life. You know, I'm going to be making all this money. And I'm like, that's great, but it's not all about money for me. Like, I am not, you know, I can take care of myself. I do take care of myself, and the money is fine, but I'm not here for, you know, the quote-unquote provider. Like, that's, first of all, that's culturally inappropriate for me. In my culture, all adults, all able-bodied adults provide. Even back pre-invasion, you know, people like to talk about men hunting, so they provided, but our women also raised crops. Like, everybody was providing. We don't believe in, that sort of power imbalance where one is dependent on the other. It's about balance and about everybody contributing to the collective good, because we are collectivist. So in any event, he didn't like that, but it was interesting when I said, in a lot of ways, this relationship, if you want to call it that, we did not call it that. I was very intentional and strategic about not ever labeling it that, because I understood even early on that he had expectations I was not willing to meet for relationship. For one, he thinks men should be do not need to be monogamous, but their women do. And of course, as we've talked about in other episodes, that's not okay to place rules on your partner that you don't abide by yourself. Because if something is bad, if it's done to you, and then you turn around and deliberately do it to your partner, you are consciously mistreating them. And you're treating them as less of a person. And as a matter of fact, in the domestic violence advocacy world, where I spend a lot of time working with, that's actually one of the behaviors that we stress as a red flag for coercive control. Whether or not it ever escalates to physical abuse, it's still not okay. It's still psychologically and emotionally abusive. There were also some other concerning things. So originally, but all of these concerning things happened like towards the end, right? In the beginning, so this last time, once he contacted me again and we started kind of spending time together, it was about 1.5 years, I think, something like that. It was quite a while. And we would have conversations. He would bring up topics about, oh, this happened to somebody he knows, or he read this, right? So it was always started with hypotheticals. And, I thought we were just having conversations, right? And so then what I later figured out was he was gathering it for me. He was gathering intel. I don't want to make it sound that ominous, but it was just trying to figure out where I stood on things without just asking me where I stood on things, right? So it was this weird shady thing, and and then those things wouldn't come up until much later, right? But there were some things that I would say that would bother him, like women don't need to be quote unquote led by men or to be submissive. So then he would do the gaslighting bullshit about, what does submissive mean? It just means, you submit to each other and you both do that. And I'm like, you know very well that is not what is meant by that word in the context of relationships between men and women, whether it's marriage or, otherwise. So, stay on topic. We're not doing this bullshit. We're not playing, and, let's redefine things. And it was also, and this was the first one that came up, and I should have at the time, and I really considered it, and I don't know why the fuck I didn't just block his number at that point, was the first time he started showing me that something was a little off, was he was complaining about women saying they're independent. Nobody, and he went on this rant about nobody's independent, we all need each other. And I'm like, okay, but that's not what is meant when they say that. Like, very well that's not what they're saying. And then it went into this whole thing about how how it's offensive for a woman to say, I don't need a man, I want one. Or, you know, I don't need my husband, I choose to be with him. Like, that was offensive. You know, and I tried to explore this with him of, you know, okay, but like, I don't need a man in my house to, you know, I don't need a man to pay my bills. I don't need a man to, you know, do things around the house or to take care of this or that. Like, I can do that. When I have a partner, I am with them because I want to be with them. I value them as a person. I, you know, value what they are to me and what they, you know, they enrich my life, all of those things. Wouldn't you rather be with someone who values you for who you are and cares about you, instead of who's stuck there because they need you or because they have no way out? You know, if they're financially dependent on you, they may legitimately not have a way out. Wouldn't you prefer that? And the answer is no. He really would rather somebody. I'm like, that's coercive. Now, hello, that should have made me never talk to him again. I don't have an explanation for why it didn't. I guess possibly I was overlooking things, and I guess it's because he was pretending to really be listening and processing these things. And so I thought that maybe he could learn these things and get better, right? I tell you, you don't look at the fucking potential, you look at the evidence. But it's easy. It's really easy to explain things away. And so it's what I kind of did. And it took, because this happened slowly over months and months and months, where he would let things go and then he would bring them back up later, and he would let things go and he would bring them back up later. And it reminds me of, you remember Jurassic Park, where the raptors are going and they're testing the electric fence like all the way around to find a weak spot? That's what it reminds me of. That's what he was doing. He was testing all the way around. And I think he had decided that he could eventually, because I was like giving, right? I was letting him push boundaries. I was moving boundaries for him. Like, I'm not a person that likes sitting on the phone very much. I definitely don't need to be in constant contact with my partner. I don't think it's healthy. It's like that level of enmeshment. You need to have your own thing. I have shit to do. I am a very busy person. You know, I have all of this stuff. And then he got to where he was like calling me and wanting to talk for like off. It started off and on all day, right? Like a few short phone calls. And then it would be like hours at a time, until it was pretty much all day. And he would ask me, like, he wouldn't be overt about trying to keep tabs on where I was at, but it would be the innocent, you know, oh, what do you have planned? What do you know? And then there started to be, you know, him gradually taking over my time, right? Like, oh, come see me this weekend. Okay, fine, I'll come see you. So I went to spend a weekend. And then after that, it becomes an expectation. It wasn't, you know, inviting me over anymore. It was, are you coming to my house or am I coming to yours? I let that go. I didn't say anything. Okay, all right, that's fine. You know, what's the harm, right? But then there started being some little things like, you know, I do a lot of community advocacy work, and then there would be some little passive aggressive comments about things that I did, and I would not cancel any of those things for him, and he wouldn't say anything, but he would be like, or, well, since you're gonna go do that, I'm gonna go do this. Okay, good, go do that. You need to have something to do this weekend while I'm gone. And there was one point that I made him really upset because he said something offhand about us having a baby, and I sort of chuckled. I'm like, that it cannot happen. We don't agree on the fundamentals of life or how to raise children, and so it would just be a nightmare. And I'm not planning to have any more kids anyway, so if you want to have kids, you need to have kids with someone else. And I'm fine with that. Of course, he found this very offensive. He interpreted it as me saying there's something wrong with him, which, to be clear, I don't think there's something wrong with him. I don't think he's an evil person per se, but I do think his ideas are regressive and harmful, and I wouldn't perpetuate that into another generation. And so, no, I wasn't willing to have a child with him. And I was also very disturbed by the fact that he would use the word legacy to mean having kids, right? That's your legacy. And he mentioned, others of his friends calling it that. And I've noticed that in a lot of the Kevin Samuels disciples. And it's such a narrow-minded, short-sighted idea of legacy that it's rather disturbing. Like, your legacy is far more than procreating and just continuing your genetic matter. I mean, your legacy is the impact that you have on this planet and your community. If you are only looking for what's inside the four walls of your house as your legacy, then you have some serious growth and development and evaluation to do. You can have a long-lasting, far-reaching legacy without ever creating children, Having children in and of itself is not an accomplishment. It's just a biological reality, whether you have or you haven't. There's far more to this life than that. Okay, and then towards the very, very end, then I think at some point, as I was saying, because the boundaries, I think he had kind of decided that I could be molded or whatever, and we had talked about business. Having, some business ventures, which was interesting because I had told him about a business I want to start. And then suddenly it was his idea and he wanted, which I didn't argue about most of the time. I'm just like, he had added a few things onto it. I'm like, okay, we can do that too. But this part is something that is really important to me. And then towards the end, one day, he's like, I have all these ideas and I know all these things and you couldn't do this without me, because he's like, I have all these ideas you never even thought about. I said, excuse me, I am the one who told you about that. In fact, I'm the one, I looked up all the code, everything that you need, all the regulations, everything that would be needed. No, this plan existed long before you came into the picture. So don't start with that with me. And so it was just interesting. But he did, I think, at a certain point decide that maybe I was a potential candidate for whatever the fuck you want to call me, because he said he doesn't believe in marriage. So, and I don't know if that's real or if that's because I don't believe in legal marriage and I have no intention of getting legally married. But towards the end, there were some very, very concerning things, like trying to isolate me from my support system. He had a tantrum on the phone one day about, you shouldn't still be friends with this person. I'm like, you don't get to make that decision and you don't get to say that to me. That's not appropriate. And there was just, at one point, after many months of this chipping away and continually trying to change my ideas and my behavior related to basically everything that makes me who I am, I finally asked him one day, what is it you even like about me? Is there why are you even bothering to be involved with me? And he got rather annoyed and said, don't you he said, why would you ask me that? Don't you know the good things about you? I said, yes, I do. And that's why I'm asking, because you have effectively criticized every single strength I have and every positive thing about who I am that makes me who I am and, makes me able to contribute to my family and my community in the way that I do. And every part of that is wrong to you. So I'm asking you, why the fuck am I here? And you know, he changed his tone to try to, you know, de-escalate, you know, keep the crazy person calm kind of thing. And he did answer me, but his answer was all things that I do for him. I'll cook for him. I'm nice to him. I treat him nice. You know, I'm nice to his family, because at some point along the way, he had introduced me to his family. I went to his family's Christmas. And yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm getting like flooding of thoughts, because there's so much, like, in hindsight you see all the things, right, that you were overlooking. You know, like I said, he was monitoring my activity through the day just by calling me and finding out what I was doing and all of those things, which of course is a huge red flag that we talk about as far as coercive control. He had this idea, of course, you know, I mentioned in the emotional immaturity episode, like, he had this idea that what he thought was right, like his opinion is fact, and he knows the best way for everybody to live their life, and if you don't agree with him, you're wrong. And like, this became so extreme. Like, I would show him data, you know, and research over, and some things have been, you know, in some of the topics would be researching over a long period of time, like huge volumes of data, and he would dismiss them. Well, you can make those numbers say anything you want to say. And I'm like, well, you can say anything you want to say, but I'm showing you actual evidence and you're giving me what you think. And those are two different things. Well, I just don't believe that. Okay, fine, whatever. So then the next time we were talking about something, and I don't remember what the topic was. I just know he said something about, I don't understand why people act like that or do something. And I started to answer, and I stopped, but you could tell I started to say something, and he's like, whoa, what do you have to say? I'm like, it doesn't matter. And, you know, he pushed me, and I said, well, you know, I was going to explain to you, because we do have data on this, we do have research on this, but you already told me you don't believe in sociology, so I'm trying to respect that boundary, like, and not, you know, give you this information that's irrelevant to you. And he went off, and this is the first time that I experienced one of his tantrums, and he goes on and on, he's ranting and raving, and I'm just like, and I'm like, okay, I did not do anything wrong here. You told me you don't believe in any of this research. Like, we went through a whole conversation about how, like, this is like 300 years of the field, and you don't believe in any of the results, because there's some sort of agenda or something, whatever, but for whatever reason you don't, and I'm trying to respect that. How am I in trouble here? And so at the end, he finally yells, like, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm better than this. And you know, and got off the phone. I'm like, okay, well, that was weird. So at that point, I knew we were just like, this was inevitable. And this was probably, I don't know, it was only a matter of weeks before we ended things entirely after that. You know, at this point I was trying to figure out, of course I was taking care of his dog. His dog was living with me most of the time. And I was just trying to figure out, what am I going to do here? Like, we still have the possibility, you know, there's still potential for us to be good business partners. And we, you know, and he went on about, he told me he doesn't think you he doesn't want to start a business with a woman who will tear it apart later because she gets emotional. I'm like, okay, I wouldn't do that, because he kept saying that that was his concern with me, and I'm like, but I wouldn't do that. Like, yes, I have emotions. We all have emotions, and that's a good thing. That's part of being human, but I'm not going to destroy our business because of it. And so finally he admitted to me later that what he meant when he says destroy it all is leave him in the relationship. And I said, well, if that's the situation, then you don't need to start a business with a woman. If you can't be grown enough to continue your business interests, like what you're describing is you destroying things because you get emotional. If you can't, if you're ready to throw the business out just because she's not in your bed anymore, like that's not, just don't do it. And I don't know, I like I said, lots of red flags, and I should have I should have ended things a long time before I did, but I didn't.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the uploads, be sure to turn on those notifications so you will know as soon as those go up. Also, like us on social media at Hypoxia Podcast, or the easiest way is to go to our website, hypoxia.com. That's HOPOKSIA.com. And the links to all the socials and all the podcast feeds are right there. And we just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us, hanging out with us, and we hope to spend more time with you in the future.